I have Larry Goldberg here today. Larry, I understand you've had an exhausting couple of weeks,
Uh,
and that doesn't even count the election. Will you be glad on Wednesday or Thursday whenever we find out the final result?
I'll tell you when we find out the final result.
Yeah. No, I don't mean glad in that way. Glad that it's over. Glad that
Oh
it's
yeah, I'd be very pleased it to be over. Yeah, yeah. I think the country tears itself apart every time. My first election was Nixon versus Kennedy, and that election I was outside the country as
uh,
a foreigner,
oh,
very interested foreigner. I was,
yeah,
I was completely besotted with the idea of becoming an American. I was a little boy in final year of high school in South Africa,
right.
and I was following it with bated breath. That turned out well. Kennedy won,
It
and
turned
he gave this.
out well for you.
It turned out well for me, and he gave this incredible inaugural speech, which I can still recite to this day. I learned it off by heart.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was an actor. That was going to be my career,
Okay.
and so it was very easy for me to learn these things. But I did. I imbibed it, and I made a little bit of uh, a dinner thing of it, being able to spout
Oh,
it off.
geez.
When I came to the United States, under the scholarship, and people would have me to dinner, I would be able to spout it off, to their amazement.
That's right. That's what sounds great.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's fun. Well, Larry, it has been quite the week, quite the month for Tesla, quite the month
quite
for
the man.
everything.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness. I'm exhausted from just living this month. So did you get the,
exciting. It's
yeah, very,
exciting.
very exciting. Did you get the new Cybertruck FSD release?
I have not
2.2.
got it yet.
Okay.
At least at last look. I haven't looked all
Oh,
day, but I can actually look now. No, but I haven't got it yet,
okay.
and I am anxious for it. And I have been getting early releases, so I'm surprised I would not have. Yeah, I don't think I've got it. I'm looking as we speak because I
Right.
can't. Yeah, it's not there. I haven't got it.
So, of course, the number one thing on everybody's mind right now is FSD and Robotaxi. And Ashok came out today earlier and said, for the first time that I know of, maybe you know of a different, maybe you know something different, but that version 13 will include unsupervised. And by that, I assume he means the ability to be unsupervised,
Correct. Yeah.
not necessarily that it'll be unsupervised the day you upload.
Right. Right.
Okay,
It'll be feature complete.
right.
And part of feature complete means that it can be unsupervised. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And so version 13 announced Ashok talking about it, and yet the stock goes down. It's like it's just sometimes it just blows me away. Um, and then 500 temps are made permanent in Berlin, and 300 new hires are needed in Berlin, and the
Isn't
stock
that
and the
isn't that
stock.
ironic? I mean, Volkswagen are laying off 30, some say 30,000, some say 50,000, some say 10,000. They're going to be laying off a large number of people, whatever is politically possible.
Right,
And, they're melting down, and there's Tesla hiring. Now, explain that,
right.
Tesla Q. Yeah.
And then what do you think that's about? Are they going to switch Model 3 to Berlin or because of the tariffs? Or what do you think why do you think they need
Yeah,
that?
I think that in the long term they're going to have to do that, but I really think it's about the lower cost car. I think it's all about the lower cost car, and I think it's all about firing up the battery,
Right.
firing up the battery business in Berlin. Look, what do they need in Berlin? They need the lower cost car and they need the lower cost batteries. They need 4680, the latest version of the 4680, and they need the lower cost construct, which can be built on the same production lines. So I think they're gearing up to do that. And I think that's a great business for them, a really great business for them.
In Europe for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, look, they're the preeminent EV manufacturer in Europe. They've been struggling against hybrids. The lower cost car is really the is the formula for success. Model Y remains the best-selling car overall in Europe. So I think, I think this is a really good and positive sign that Tesla's strategy is paying off. Would I have preferred them to to have rolled out newer models sooner? Yes, I would have. And I spoke to this, 2 years ago and 3 years ago. But they haven't. Now, the other thing is they're going to have to make robotaxis in Europe, So I think that,
The cyber cab itself.
yeah, the cybercab itself. So I think what we're seeing is a long-term process. There's going to be expansion of the factory. There's going to be installation of the battery factory, and there's going to be the production of the low-cost car. Of all of that, I'm convinced.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now, I've got Troy Teslike today saying that the 515,000 for the quarter is within reach, but he's about 20,000 under that right now.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he's concerned about production, actually, saying that the current production levels couldn't get us there. Do you have
He's
any-
wrong. He's wrong.
Okay, I was
Yeah, I looked at his note. I've got used to Troy starting the quarter at with a very pessimistic note. And it's not because he's, sandbagging us. He's not, because that's not how Troy works.
Mhm.
It's how I remember in December of 2018, him being very light
Mm.
because he was looking back rather than looking forward.
No.
And in January 2019, we were all shocked by the announcement. So Troy really is very accurate when it's business as usual. But when we have those step changes, as we do with Tesla every now and again, he doesn't quite, catch up to it until the last minute. I could be wrong. And look, Troy has had a very, very good record. I know AJ is pretty down on him, and AJ, disregards some of his numbers. But I think, and I have a lot of respect for AJ's analytic skills, which are fantastic. But I still use a lot of Troy's analysis in trying to decide for myself where I think we're going to come out. I think he may be wrong in this particular case, and we'll see. I mean, he's underestimating, I believe, the Cybertruck production capacity. I know he did last quarter.
Right.
I think he's still doing it this quarter because I don't think he's quite caught up. But, it's very easy to criticize him, but he has a very strong track record. So we'll see. We'll see.
I agree with you on the Cybertruck because he even said out loud that he didn't expect any increase in the production numbers.
Yes, very strange. Yeah, very strange. Yeah.
Tesla hinted earlier at this is a crazy idea, Larry. Okay. One of my crazy ideas. Okay.
All right.
I have a few. Tesla had earlier kind of hinted at
Not that you've ever had a crazy idea before, but okay.
Tesla had hinted at a 2.7 million vehicle year for 2025, but now Musk has come back and said more specifically 2.4 is kind of a max in a range. Now, do you think it would be possible that he would put that other 300,000 into the Robotaxi fleet? Maybe 30,000 a month the first month, 50,000 the second month, because the return on that investment is like 3 to 4 months. You get it back.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? But
I really think it would be a struggle to reach those kinds of numbers in Robotaxi deployment during next year. I really do. I think next year is going to be, exploration and testing. If we hit the marks that the AI team is talking about, then I think we will introduce Robotaxi. And remember that the Robotaxi is not likely to come out next year. It's going to be the existing fleet being converted into.
Right.
But I just don't see the deployment of that kind of those kinds of numbers um, going into the fleet. And the other thing is, I really don't think it's going to be new cars. I think it's going to be used cars that go into the,
Well, I've been saying for a week at least that
yeah,
they'll take the lease, the incoming leases, the trade-ins. I mean,
yeah,
those are the first ones that they'll launch into their own personal.
yes.
But I could also imagine if they think the numbers are there, that they could start putting out some new Model 3s, for instance, of low-end Model 3.
The whole sense, the whole business of Robotaxi is not going to be like just a switch you turn. It's a business and it has to have operational excellence. It has to have operational capability and then it has to operational excellence and then it has to have test areas and it has to expand. And, everybody thinks you turn a switch and you'll have 100,000 robotaxis out in the fleet and then 200,000. It's not going to how it's not going to be how it works. If they roll out robotaxis next year, remember, they will not be able to be charged other than by, supercharger. So you've got to figure out that whole supercharger or, what kind of charger you're going to figure on and where you're going to charge them and what that operational thing is going to look like. And so I think that if they start the robotaxi next year, which they may, I would say it would expand with caution and with the relative slowness before it really. I would look, if they start in 2025, I would look for an explosion mid to late 2026 when they really start getting real numbers out on robotaxis, which can do inductive charging, and they have inductive chargers, and they have their app, functioning well, and they have tried and tested methods of how to do this. That's my, but I'm just a normal business person. I'm not Elon Musk, so I can't, you know, create miracles, and he can, and so maybe I'm all wrong.
Okay. Well, I mean, on the one hand, he has said that, assuming regulations, assuming he can get the regulations that he wants, that Texas and California roll out, well, there's a million, by that time, there'll be at least 1,500,000 Model 3s and Model Ys in California alone. There's about 1,000,004 now. So out of that 1,000,005, if 5% of them get turned out, that would be 75,000 vehicles immediately available for the fleet. And I think it might be higher than 5%, but maybe not much higher. But even 5%, that would be a pretty large fleet immediately turned on.
Yeah, but there's not going to be any immediate turning on for a robotaxi. It's going to be, as I've said, operationally imperative to turn them on in a measured way. So even if there were 75,000 cars, you're going to only turn on at the first blush a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand, somewhere in that range.
Mhm, mhm.
And then a second blush and third blush. And so whether you can even get to 10,000, 20,000 in year half is an open question.
So Larry, that would then suggest that my earlier, and not just my, but other people's, I think even Kathy, I think even Ark Invest has said that that their recommendation would be to start with supervised rides, where
Yeah.
the owners are the supervisors, are their employee is the supervisor, so that they would be able to get that operational experience.
Well, they've started with supervised rides. They're already running
Right,
supervised rides. It's
right.
operational, and that's the operational experience they need. And they're going to expand that. Palo Alto could take over. I mean, Palo Alto have asked them to start. Never mind San Francisco. So the town of Palo Alto looks like it's going to be the first town. And it think about it as you think about the charging network. The charging network is today the largest charging network in the world, and it's ubiquitous and it's everywhere and it's highly successful. That's not how it started.
Right, right.
And in a way, it's very similar. Now, hopefully, it can expand faster and larger, but it has to start with baby steps.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. It's good conversation. Be interesting to see how this all works out when it starts. So, Waymo, you said you had an interesting conversation with some Waymo expertise this morning, and
Well, that and Waymo actually published a paper
okay.
on a product that they called 𝐒𝐚𝐽, end-to-end multimodal model for autonomous driving, where they took a Google model, a foundation model, a multimodal large language model, and they used it to control the cars. Switched off the Lydar, switched off the radar, and drove with just 𝐒𝐚𝐽.
Wow.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, no kidding.
So the thesis is, and the folks that I spoke to, the thesis is very simple. If you take the cost of radar, LiDAR, in particular LiDAR, and the number of LiDAR sensors they've got, and you take the compute power necessary to support that,
Right.
you're probably getting to the same level of cost as a cybercab itself.
Yeah.
So ipso facto, it doesn't matter how you break this out or what the business model is, you cannot compete.
I got you. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you have this cost that is equal to a cybercab cost, plus you have to buy from a third-party OEM a whole motor car.
Right.
And that's not going to cost you much less than $30,000, you know, because you're buying a luxurious four-seater, that's their model, you know, five-seater, a luxurious five-seater. And so no matter how far ahead they are now, or they say they are now, operationally, the numbers you can't compute the numbers. It just won't work. And it's just not scalable.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
So now Waymo is saying, well, it's horses for courses. You know, in some jurisdictions, we may just have 𝐒𝐚𝐽. In other jurisdictions, we may have LiDAR. In other jurisdictions, we have 𝐒𝐚𝐽 and radar. I mean, this is dreams. This is, you know, hopes and dreams. It's not going to happen that way. They're going to have to commit to a direction. They're going to have to commit to a direction. And they just don't have the miles.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, for general driving with 𝐒𝐚𝐽. I think that they're going to have to go through the same catechism that Tesla has had to go through. Now, their catechism will be shorter because they have this much larger base of compute, and you know, the replacement rate may be faster than Tesla was able to make the replacement rate. On the other hand, they just don't have the miles that Tesla have got.
Yeah.
And we know for a product like 𝐒𝐚𝐽 or for a product like FSD, you need an enormous number of miles of good driving.
Right.
To have the enormous number of miles of good driving, you need an enormous number of examples. To have an enormous number of examples, you have to have 5-7 million cars on the road, not 500-700 cars on the road,
Right.
or even 5,000-7,000 cars on the road. So, you know, the group that I was talking with, the sense is that this had to come. This was a natural evolution. This proves that probably Elon was correct all the way along, as he so often is, or always is. Not always, but he so often is. And that it's going to be a heavy lift for Waymo to get to where Tesla is. And the other thing is Tesla has this incredible network of distribution centers and presence globally, not just in the United States, but globally. So, you know, it's still a horse race. Waymo's right there. I mean, Waymo's in front now, to be honest. And you've got this huge steamroller of Tesla coming down after you, and you're
Yeah.
trying to jackrabbit out this way and then that way, and then, find a solution. So that's very an interesting development.
Okay. All right. That is. I agree with you. Just saw the headline going across. You might not have even seen it yet. NVIDIA is joining the Dow, and Intel is out.
I mean, Intel has been out for me for many, many years. I told you the Intel story, right?
Well, I don't know. There's so many.
No, why I got
Oh,
rid of Intel and why I lost confidence in Intel. I
I
didn't tell you the story?
no, not sure.
Okay. So many years ago, I'd have to go back 25 years or something. I had a person who worked with me, very fine person. Her sister worked for Intel, quite a senior person at Intel, and I had lunch with her, the sister who worked for Intel, in San Francisco one year when I was there for something or other. And we were talking, having a very pleasant meeting because the person who worked for me was she ran the business. She was a
Okay.
sort of a chief operating officer.
Mhm.
Anyway, I was talking to the sister and the person who worked for Intel, and I said, so I don't know, we were talking and she said, she's going away next year. I said, are you leaving Intel? She said, no, no, every 7 years we get a year off.
Nice. Nice job if you can find it.
Sold my Intel stock,
Back
never looked at
immediately.
that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they gave it a fancy name and
Yeah.
but I mean,
Sabbatical. A sabbatical. A year.
that's what it was. Yeah, but I mean they had an even more fancy name for it. I forget what it was, but I mean, I said to myself, this is not, you know, anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
that was it. This is like IBM. I felt like I was talking to somebody from IBM,
yeah. Yeah.
and at that point, IBM, I was ready to sell it short. I never did, but I should have. Yeah.
Well, Larry, you and I have enjoyed many long conversations and exciting and fun conversations about the labor numbers from the from the U.S. government. And today certainly has to be the capper. 𝐒𝐭𝐮𝐲𝐝 says it this way, which is in addition to what the headlines were saying. The number of permanent job losses jumped by 153,000 in October to 1.84 million, the highest since November of 2021. Over the last 2 years, permanent job losses have risen by an alarming 665,000. And the number of people who have been terminated involuntary or seeking work is now up for 18 straight months. In past economic cycles, such a long stretch has never occurred outside of recessions. Meanwhile, Americans who were unemployed for 27 weeks and over surged by 317,000 in this reporting period. Anyway, there was a lot more to say about the numbers this morning, Larry, but I'll let you, because I know you posted about it. What were you thinking today?
If you compare the Trump administration up to the date of the pandemic,
Right.
it was a poster book in Reaganomics. Now, he didn't get it together, and he didn't have Elon, doing the Reagan, and it took the second term of Reagan actually before they started actually tearing all the, pages out of what was that commission you told me?
Grace Commission.
The Grace Commission, tearing all the pages out of, I mean, out of the regulation books. But it was a really good start. And then we had the pandemic. And then we had, the Biden years. And I just compared employment, GDP, and debt,
Mm.
and employment of government employees.
Ah, yes.
And on every single statistic, if you cut out the pandemic,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Trump's numbers were, I wouldn't say they were excellent, but they were pretty damn good, pretty darn good.
Either way, Larry.
All right. If you then look at Biden's numbers, they were not bad, they were terrible on every one of those parameters. And the comparison is pretty miserable. I think the defining era of the Biden administration was coming out of the pandemic, the decision to pump even more cash into people's hands. And that's been recognized. But if you look at the actual numbers, it's pretty sickening what happened.
Yeah.
And, I don't know why the labor numbers are constantly having to be revised or constantly having to, are constantly being optimistic. I don't know if it's a function of the system or it's a function of corruption. I don't know what it is, but clearly something is seriously wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all I can say is this has been a terrible period for the American economy. It's been a terrible period for the consumer. It's been a terrible period for the production worker, not the service worker. He's done pretty good, but the production worker has been, in fact, the number of production jobs lost, is actually quite high.
Right.
And the number of people as a percentage of the population, the acknowledged population that are working, has fallen, consistently. So, as you know, I wasn't a great Trump supporter. I wasn't a great Trump, fan. But it's just quite clear that if we have another 4 years of this kind of vacillation and pandering and giving away money and paying people's college debt and, all of the stuff that's been going on, and bringing in these millions of people who we have absolutely no idea what they're doing. I can't see from not a political position, from an economic position. Now, had we brought in 2 million, 5 million, 11 million immigrants with great academic achievement or great technical skills or great labor skills, people who knew and made product. Yeah, if they had come in, 11 million, you'd think they would have replaced people's who doing a job. No, they wouldn't have. They would have supercharged our industrial development.
Right.
So to me, the numbers are just pitiful. And the thing is, nobody saw it coming. Everybody thought, we're doing, but the inflation was a direct result of government super expenditure when it was no longer necessary. Look, the government super expenditure in the height of the pandemic was absolutely vital. I can't take it away. My daughter, her business was destroyed literally overnight. She had an education business. She did after-school teaching. She had classes in multiple locations. Children stopped going to school. Those classes vanished. Her business vanished. And, the Trump support helped her.
Right.
But once the schools went back and the business started up again, what the heck was he spending the money on?
And he was told not to. Everybody said, so many people, economists told him that's not the way to go.
All of that went into pricing. All of that went directly to higher prices. And, we've been suffering ever since. So, I published these numbers today in response to somebody who's tried to prove that, by some flip of
magic of math.
Magic of math, try to prove that, the Trump years were terrible compared to Biden. But really, they were good years. They weren't great years. They weren't Reagan-esque years, but they were good years. I think, though, that if we now have people like Musk and uh, uh, I
Vivek
guess
and Elon.
RFK,
Yep.
RFK, and so on. Vivek, I think we would do great. And the only thing is, I don't trust Trump to be consistent. I don't trust him to not to go in all kinds of directions. I don't trust him to, he can't keep his mind running on, rails.
Mhm.
Although he is fairly single-minded about many things. But, I don't understand why he doesn't bring his son-in-law back. I
I
mean,
hope
that
so. I hope so. Yeah.
that guy is the ideal Secretary of State. If that guy is the Secretary of State, my vote goes to Trump today.
Easy decision.
I
Yes,
mean, he was so fantastic. I mean,
it's so much about the team. We all know this in whatever we do.
yeah.
And you hear Trump saying the biggest mistake he made in the first term was that he didn't know who to hire and he listened to the people who were around him and they made lousy decisions. This
But
time,
who's he going to hire now? We don't know.
well, nobody's going in with a team this time. He's
Yeah,
got
that's true. He's made Vivek and RFK the head of that team.
right.
Some people think RFK is crazy, and I did too until I listened to RFK, talk on the All In pod, and I realized, wow, they're lying about this guy. By the way, when I realized they were lying about him, I started going back and looking at. Anyway, it doesn't matter. All I know is that it shook the foundations of my confidence in, amongst other publications, the Wall Street Journal.
Yes. I've actually considered stopping my my viewing of the Wall Street Journal, but once in a while they get it right, so I have to keep.
No, I actually canceled it
Oh, you did. Okay.
after 30 years.
Yes, yes. Yes, I started canceling those kind of publications about 30 years ago, also, starting with the LA Times, and that rag has gotten worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, you actually guessed that my next question, because I was going to ask you for your unfettered analysis of what the economy does, depending on who wins, and you just did it. So,
Yeah, well, it's not going to be an easy lift. It's going to be a heavy lift, whoever takes over. I think, if Kamala takes over, then clearly she's not going to be in charge.
right.
She's clearly not going to be in charge. There's going to be a committee of, Democratic Party elders who are going to run the country. Um, it's unclear to me, if it's just going to be business as usual. We're going to probably have a budget that's going to add another 4 trillion over and above the current rate of spend. If Trump takes over, there's going to be, royal pain because they're going to, the states that vote against him are all going to look to conduct lawfare against him,
Mm,
and they're going to go hell for leather at Elon. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be
yeah.
a really tough couple of years until things shake out.
Well, Larry, I said that I would give you a minute to talk about politics, and so I already had this scheduled. And it just, it, the silly season is upon us, and in the last 4 days,
Yeah,
we've had Mark Cuban say something very stupid about women. He had to walk that back.
yeah,
CNN with another cutting of a piece of what Trump said in a very despicable way, in a very dishonest way. And one of their panelists had to walk back his comments with regard to it. Joe Biden called the followers of Trump garbage, and the White House changed the permanent record,
yeah.
his actual remarks, which were on video.
Which
And,
they would never do. They would never do a thing like that. Yeah.
and then Walls uses gay as a slur when referring to Musk. This all happens in 4 days. How in the world?
I mean, I think our our sensitivities at this point are just too high. I mean, most of the stuff would go unnoticed in the normal course. And what these guys are saying are not that terrible and not that the end of the world. So it's an election. Calm down, take care. You know, take a breather.
Yeah, yeah, right. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
So, do you,
I'm much more interested in in the analysis of the numbers from from an economics point of view.
right, right.
That's the what we call in Yiddish the tachlis. That's really the meat of it. That's what really matters. That's the materiality.
I've never heard that Yiddish phrase before. That's a new
Yeah.
one for me.
Tachlis. Yeah.
I thought I knew all the good ones. All right. I'll have to add that to my repertoire. So, okay.
Another good Yiddish word. Yeah.
Another good Yiddish word. Yes. I grew up saying 𝐒𝐭𝐮𝐬𝐿 was my,
𝐒𝐭𝐮𝐬𝐿.
I
Yeah.
just say that, my
Yeah.
parents were okay with that. 𝐒𝐭𝐮𝐬𝐿, that was just normal.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else about the election, Larry? I think you had something on your mind. I can't remember what, but
No, I think I
that's it.
pretty
Okay.
much did it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then the markets today were happy. They thought they liked what took place, with regard to those labor numbers, but all of a sudden the bond market went up 10 basis points.
I think the bond market are much, much, much more sensitive to the reality.
I mean, how does the
If
bond
the bond market goes up, that
10
is a vote. That is a very big indication that the smart money is on the Trump victory.
Yeah, that seems to me, that's what I said, early on in our conversation. That's one of the
Yeah.
things that gives me a lot of hope. But the 10-year up 10 basis points is now at almost back to 4.4. It's just craziness.
Yeah, I was looking at money market returns today because I was helping my daughter with her portfolio. I mean, we're getting 5.5%
5.5%.
on call money.
Yeah, yeah. So I did a little research today, Larry, and I hope I'm not embarrassed to say what I'm going to say, but I got a little curious. I asked Grok which between the Treasury and the Fed funds, and the Treasury notes, the Treasury themselves, and the Fed funds, which things influence what in terms of interest rates out there. So I've always known that the Treasury notes, the 10-year, is the one that influences, mortgages the most and long bonds for businesses.
Right.
But then I'm like, okay, what influences car loans and shorter term loans? Well, according to Grok, that would be more the Fed rate on the short term stuff. The Fed
Right.
rate is more impact. So we could actually end up, and by the way, I also looked this up the other day, usually, Larry, and I haven't cared that much 10 years ago, but the Treasury rate is the Treasury bond rate, the 10-year rate, is almost always much higher than the Fed funds rate. The Fed, looking back over 30 years, Fed funds rate could be at 1%, 2%, and the Treasury might be at 4 or 5, 6, 7%. So we're inverted on that one right now with having the Fed fund rate being higher than the Treasury, the 10-year.
Right.
So we could have a situation here where the Fed actually goes ahead with all their cuts so that we can get people back to buying cars, back to buying refrigerators, et cetera. But that still wouldn't help much with the mortgages. But maybe the bonds pull back a bit if the Fed continues with their cuts.
Or they could go higher.
Or they could go higher. Well,
Because if the market doesn't believe in these cuts, then the uncertainty these cuts will actually cause them to go higher. The real question is, if Trump wins, do rates collapse?
right.
That's the real question, and that's a very real possibility.
Well, and again, Grok saying what I think you and I already believed is that the treasuries are most influenced by the inflation rate.
Yeah.
Like a point and a half. People want to make a point and a half over inflation on their
Right.
10-year. That's kind of the traditional number. So the only remaining piece of the inflation puzzle that I don't understand why people aren't paying more attention to is we have 4 to 5% year over year increases in wages. Now that's great for the wage earner, but every place I look in terms of the various different purchasing agent analysis, whatever, they're all saying that the inputs are high in terms of higher prices, mostly wages, but they're not able to push them through into retail or into their sales. So there's a compression, a margin compression. It's not going to last forever. At some point, those companies are going to have to pass that through. So my worry would be on the services side, where 40, 50%, 60% of the selling price is based on the wage.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's true. And all of this, overhanging all of this is, AI and what it does to the service industry. And so we're in a very interesting moment. It'd be very interesting to see what happens post Tuesday.
Yes, well, that's definitely. But Tuesday is going to be interesting enough, and then maybe Wednesday, and maybe Thursday, and maybe Friday. Who knows when we'll actually get the result? In addition to all that bond action today, Tesla ended up actually only down 87 cents at the end of the day, and in the after hours has grabbed back 22 of that. So I guess we could call Tesla flat today. But in the meantime, the Dow was up 288, NASDAQ was up 144, and the S&P was up 23. So it was a pretty good day for the market. NVIDIA bounced back a bit, Microsoft bounced back, but Apple, there's a little unhappiness with their what do you call it, their guidance. So it didn't quite guide as high as I guess the street wanted them to.
Yeah.
And the Cathie Woods did pretty well today, even with that 10-point jump in the bond. So that was a little surprising. The rest of, let's see. I've been very interested the last few days. I mean, oil obviously has been bouncing back up again. Not so much today, only 7 cents on Texas Intermediate. Natural gas coming back down. You probably weren't here, Larry. I explained this morning to my folks that natural gas, part of the reason they were claiming that natural gas just rocketed the other day was because people all of a sudden realized that the data centers were going to potentially need a lot of natural gas to fire up their generators. It's like, I'm sure that Brad Ferguson would like to hear that, since he loves that stock that uses natural gas for. But I
think they're out of that stock now.
I think they might be also, yes. Gold hanging around at 2750, so it did not continue its assault on 28
Yet.
Silver, yet. Oh, I'm sure it will. Yes.
I think let's wait until Wednesday and see what gold does.
See where gold happens then. Silver off of its high, backing off down to 32.5 now, and copper slightly up, but still in the normal range. And then Bitcoin was the one I wanted to check on. It has also collapsed after making a really good run at an all-time.
Collapsed or just come down to 69?
69, yeah. 69.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't call that a collapse. I wouldn't call that a collapse.
73, 70.
4%.
Yeah, okay. 4%. Is that what that is?
Maybe 4.5, but
okay. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Well, it looks so big though, because it's such large numbers.
I know, yeah.
Couldn't they do a split so it'd be easier numbers to look at?
No, they can't do a split. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. A Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin, never going to change.
Going to change.
Yeah.
Well, those are the numbers, Larry. And any final thoughts going into the last weekend before the election? You and I will get to talk about it one more time on Monday night, but what do you?
I've already voted, so.
Me too.
Yeah, so who knows? I mean, I wonder how many people by now have already voted. And how many non-voters already voted? Anyway, that's a whole
How
other story.
many non-voters?
Yeah. All right.
Well, all right. We need
Randy.
to let people know. I just want to let people know. Had Phil
Beisel. Phil
yes,
Beisel.
Beisel, you say you know him and like him.
He's a terrific guy. I love him. Yeah.
He was on earlier today. So folks that
Yeah.
haven't seen that video yet,
Oh, you got to go and watch. You got to go. I'm going to go and watch it because
okay. All right.
this guy's got so much experience in, he worked for Rivian for years at a very senior level, and he knows, a lot. And
Right.
so I
Yes.
have a high regard for him.
You have just begun to tap into that knowledge, Larry. And then coming up this weekend, 3 shows with Brian Wang, Saturday morning, probably Saturday noon and Sunday morning, all talking about the future, but mostly about the future as the Robotaxi future. So I think I've already done all 3 shows. They are fantastic. So
You're killing it, man. You're killing it.
I'm trying.
All right, Randy.
Have a great, you too. And to
Bye.
all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.